Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to our Mentor Forum. I'm Sandra Mulligan, one of the Business Development Managers at the institution, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to the June Mentor Forum. If you're new to the forum, I've set it up as a way for mentors to keep up to date and share best practice and access additional tools and insights which can be added to the mentoring toolbox that you need to build up and maintain to develop your mentoring skills. Today's a little bit different to the other forums in that we don't have any slides to share with you. However, what we do have is a fantastic panel of 4 experts who have generously agreed to share their industry knowledge and experiences of mentoring with all of us today. So the session is being recorded so that it's available to refer back to after we finish. Now, I've already shared brief biogs of the fabulous 4 as part of the joining instructions, but for the benefit of anyone who has perhaps missed those biographies, I'm going to start by asking each one of our experts to briefly introduce themselves to you. So if I could start with you, please, Pam, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sandra. So hi, everyone. I'm Pam Anderson. I'm currently Head of Institutional Engagement at AEC Cloud Space. We manufacture small satellites and we provide services and missions from small nanosatellites. We've got a base in Glasgow and facilities in Sweden, in the Netherlands and the US as well. So my background is mechanical and aerospace engineering. I've spent around the last 10 years or so in the space industry in the UK.
Great, thanks very much, Pam. And John?
Hi, my name is John Calcraft. I am an engineering manager at Caterpillar in Peterborough, where we manufacture industrial diesel engines up to 7 litres in displacement. I've been there ever since I graduated in 2001. So yeah, a lot of experience going through the ranks and now leading the MPDS scheme for that site.
Great, thanks very much, John. Simon?
I can't remember what I wrote now. Simon Wood, work for Jaguar Land Rover. We obviously make cars. I think most people have heard of us. Background in mechanical engineering as an aerospace engineer in the Air Force, then went to diggers, then into cars, and have been running professional development schemes for JCB and then Jaguar Land Rover for around 12 years, I think it is now.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Mick.
Thank you, Sandra, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mick Davis, formerly an electrical apprentice, believe it or not, with the mining industry, and I moved on to food production and then more latterly to a design and manufacturing company in Cheshire. But I am retired, so I'm as busy as ever being retired, if that's possible. But as far as you're concerned this afternoon, I am a professional development consultant for the IMechE, which allows me to do accreditation visits for MPDS. It allows me also to be a facilitator for the Northwest region, or as was prior to the virtual days. But probably more importantly, I actually train the assessors on the interview panels. So feel free. Okay, thank you, Sandra.
Great, well, thanks for that, guys. And thanks very much also to everybody who's joined us today, so both the panel and all of you listening in, and we very much appreciate your ongoing support of the IMechE mentoring community, so thank you very much for that. I'm pleased to say that lots of interesting and thought-provoking questions have already been submitted, and my colleague Lara Mallet has kindly agreed to keep an eye on the chat for the additional questions that you can submit live today. So thanks, Lara, for that, and please use the chat box for this purpose. So without further ado, let's start unpacking some of this expertise. I'm going to start off with a question to John, and of course all our other experts can add in his answer. Mentoring can be described as a brain to pick, an ear to listen to, and a push in the right direction. What are the most important things that you have learned in transitioning from mentee to mentor, and do you have a mentor now?
Yeah, it's a great question to get us started. I don't actually have a professional mentor at present. I probably should do, but But I have found that as I've gone through my career, I've maintained really positive relationships with a number of former managers and senior leaders about the business that I can reach out to, and I do use those relationships and draw on them when I need to. When I joined as a graduate, I joined the NPDS scheme and I was assigned a mentor, and they weren't a chartered engineer or an incorporated engineer, so I sort of had a delegate mentor and a normal mentor. There wasn't really any accountability in that relationship, and he was a very nice chap, but there wasn't really any drive or need. There was nothing really pushing me to stay on track. So in the end, I hopelessly fell behind and fell off the scheme. So as I transitioned into mentoring, I really wanted my mentees to understand that they need to stay on track, or they really will struggle as they start to get busy in their career. The other thing I've learned is that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can't make your developing engineers stay on track and write their reports. However, what you can do is hold them to account on their commitment to the scheme, and give them a reality check. So that's something that I've always strived to do is make sure that they're being honest, and real with, are they on track or not, and if not, what are they going to change? Because if they just keep working in the same way, they'll get the same result. But the other thing that I've found is that even if they fall hopelessly behind, you can still meet regularly and you can still support their professional development, even if they're actually not staying on track with the rigors of MPS. So like that was lacking for me as a mentee, and that's something that I've tried to encourage. And then as I've transitioned into being the scheme administrator, the other thing that I've really learned is that mentors don't need to have all the answers, and they don't need to be in a senior position. They just need to ask the right questions and show an interest. So I've found that actually newly accredited engineers make some of the best mentors, especially for undergraduate placements, where they've recently been through that development experience and that journey, and they can share that experience straight away. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think a critical friend is often the role of a mentor, and I think as well it's very important that it's a mutually beneficial relationship, that you both learn from it. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add to John's comments? Simon?
Just echo everything you said. And not having been through a scheme myself, knowing that some of the engineers that came through on undergraduate schemes in my old role, when they came back and then developed, and some of them now become registered, helping the next generation, is really beneficial for them, having just been through the scheme, and also beneficial for their new mentees. So that is a good way of utilising their skill. And we expanded that a bit by getting the undergraduates to do IMechE, because then they help the next batch of undergrads with that, and they develop their own mentoring skills as soon as they start. And it also ticks quite a few of the boxes in terms of developing other people to become a chartered engineer.
Great, really interesting. Thank you. Looking back, Pam, were there any of the competence requirements that you struggled to achieve? How did you go about achieving them? And what advice would you share with a developing engineer who is finding it hard to get exposure to some of the competence requirements with their current employer?
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. So for me, at the time of going for professional registration, my background had predominantly been in academia. And so there were a few competencies, mainly on the C, around kind of managing people and resources, that I really struggled with gaining experience with. A few of the others, the kind of A's and B's, are, the day job of doing a PhD and then postdoc research, and those were fine, but certainly on the kind of the people management and the resource management was difficult. For me, the way that I addressed that was to look for opportunities for training in those areas. So if I wasn't doing those things as part of my kind of everyday job, then there was some training schemes that were run by the university around project management training. And then subsequent to that, you could register to do your exam and become a certified associate in project management. So for me, that's kind of how I kind of went down a more formal kind of training route to try and get the experience of those competencies that I wasn't doing day to day. So in terms of kind of advice to developing engineers around those competencies that they're struggling with. I think look for opportunities out with your own organisation. You know, there's lots of, particularly just now when a lot of training is online and on webinars that you can do on your lunchtime or, you know, after work. You know, the IMechE has lots of great kind of free resources in terms of training and webinars and CPD that you can be doing. So I think my advice would be to look beyond your own organisation for opportunities. You know, that might be volunteering, it might be, you know, helping out with STEM clubs or taking on various roles within the IMechE or other organisations that might mean that you're able to tick some competencies that you just don't have the opportunity to get kind of day to day.
I think as well, perhaps making friends with your line manager where you can as well, and your mentor perhaps can help you with building up your skills and confidence to approach the line manager to help you get those opportunities as well. Great, thanks. Good answer. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay, moving on to the next question that's come in, which I think is a really interesting one. Requests to act as a mentor can come from engineers at very different stages of their careers. What techniques do you employ to evaluate where a developing engineer is in terms of meeting the UK spec competence requirements? Perhaps I could put that to you, Simon, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so one of the things we've got, and I've been recently introduced it, is we've done a bit of a simple tool to find out where they're at to start with. So if you take an early careers engineer, somebody's coming in as an apprentice or a graduate, that they are going to be further down the scale, but they will have some experience. So we need to find out. So it gets them to write a short report, and then the mentor will review that, talk to them, have a meeting and go through, but they self-assess broadly against the 5 criteria and say, well, yeah, I'm at 0, I know nothing about this, or I'm at 1, or you'll get graduates that will claim they're at a 3 when they first start, and the mentor talks to them and they're back down at 1 before they know it. That's the usual thing. So that sets the scene for the graduates, for the early careers and new people. When you get a bit further in, assessment of a developing engineer actually on the scheme itself, it's more around the discussion between the mentor and the individual, getting them to review what they've been doing. I tend to personally, and a lot of the mentors that I speak to and we work with, tend to set, right, okay, for a quarter we're going to look at these 3 or 4 competence areas. These are the bits you need to develop in, this is where you're weaker, and they'll come up with some evidence as to how they think they've met, improved, where they've developed, and review them that way. But it's all done certainly in terms of developing the early careers people against UK spec, either direct from UK spec itself or in the terms of our graduates. And that's just not just the engineers either. All our graduates now have got a specification they work towards, which is written against IMechE. So there'll be a bit of confusion when those with masters start looking at CEng after year 2, but it gets them working towards it. So it's about comparing what they can do against UK spec, and we do use across the board, whether they go in IMechE or not, the 4 levelling statements, 1 to 4, that have been widely published by the IMechE. They are very good. So it's that aware, familiar, skilled and expert using those 4 levels and using those statements, which work, and we're currently working across the rest of the business with those as well. For the more senior engineer, maybe somebody that's come on scheme and they want mentor, and they've heard about, they've maybe bypassed a graduate scheme and they've heard about becoming an incorporated or a chartered engineer or EngTech, and they go, well, how do I do that? It's a conversation with the mentor, but again, we tend to advise that the mentor sits down with them either physically or on Teams at the moment, and they'll go through UK spec for whichever category they think they might be ready for or they want to work towards, and they'll go through it, and it might be literally they'll tick off the ones they know they can meet at level 3 or better, and then the ones that they can't meet, they'll underline, put where they're at, and then the discussion starts as to where they've got to go. So it's about finding that starting point. It might be at 0, It may be an apprentice that's got zero experience, zero knowledge because they haven't even done their degree yet, or there might be a graduate that's done an undergraduate scheme and 2 years in the business but didn't get signed up to MPDS for some reason at the start. So it just sets that. But I always push them back. Use UK spec as that guide, because there's no difference across all the institutions then, and that's the key thing, because we've got people wanting to join IMechE and the only difference is the Institute of Civil Engineers, and they're a pain. They've got their own specification, basically.
Okay, so UK spec uses the framework then and get people to
always pushing back UK spec.
Okay. Anybody else got any other tools that they use to try and help people calibrate where they're at? Mick, did you have something you wanted to say there?
Yeah, I just don't want developing engineers, as we call them, to think that suddenly experts after 6 months in the industry. They've got to get used to the learning curves. You know, when they first leave academia and they move into industry, it's a steady progress. It's not a race. It's not an 100-meter dash. It's a marathon over a 3-4 year period. So nice, gentle steps and build up both your knowledge and your confidences.
Thanks. And the other thing we always in the business development team, one thing we really encourage people to do is to try and just keep a record of what they're doing and get into that habit of, even if it's just once a week, just to write one sentence about what they've done that week. And that just means it very quickly builds into a record that they can easily refer back to. This leads nicely into our next question, which is, how should a mentor get a mentee enthused and looking forward to their next meeting with the mentor and keep them motivated? Any tips to share? I think that's one that a lot of people on the call today are going to be eager to hear more about. So I'll put that to you, Mick, please.
Well, it's an interesting question in that you should not have to enthuse a developing engineer. It's their career, what they're looking forward to. But from a mentor's perspective, a developing engineer wants to see on the other side of their desk or table an enthusiastic engineer, a committed engineer whose commitment is solely in the interests of their developing engineer. Yeah, a sense of humour by all means. Yeah, you've got to be able to see everything that's happening. You've got to be empathetic, and you've really got to envision where the developing engineer is coming from and the questions that they're going to pose of you. Yeah, you're not necessarily going to have all the answers, but if you don't know the answers, you've got to be honest enough to say, I don't quite know that, and go and get to know for them. So keep encouraging enthusiastic engineering. That's what it's all about. Nobody wants to see a dullard at the other side of the table. Yeah, it switches everybody off. So it's about your personality. It's about your disposition. It's as simple as smiling, welcome, committed to them being there for that half an hour, 20 minutes or whatever, but show that enthusiasm. There is only those developing engineers for that moment in the world that we care about. Yeah, stop the telephones ringing, close the doors, make them feel special.
That's really important. Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's really good advice. You know, that's really important to feel that you're interested in their development in particular.
Exactly.
And leading on from that question, how should a mentor structure their discussion when they meet with their mentee? Should it be a discussion overall about their development, or should it relate to each UK spec competence area? And also, what would you suggest is a good time duration for each discussion? So maybe put that to you, John.
Yeah, this is another great question. I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I might actually be quite controversial here, but I do think it's very personal, and it depends on both you and the mentee as to what feels right and what you're comfortable with. In management, I've known some managers who have literally have a standard work template for their one-to-ones, you know, and they write minutes for one-to-ones and things like that. Whereas I've supervised scores of people over the years, and I don't think I've ever had 2 one-to-one experiences that have been the same. So my approach, excuse me, my approach is to work from a solid organizational base, which then frees me up to be more fluid in how I actually approach each individual meeting. So my organizational base that I put in place is an hour every 4 weeks. That works nicely with my calendar because once a month doesn't quite work, but once every 4 weeks, everything rotates around 2, 4, or 1 week periods. So that gives me 12 or 13 meetings a year in which to cover all the bases, which I think is plenty. And I'll stick to that, even if there's not a report. It's also something that I set up because I find, even though it's their career and it's their accountability, actually, if I set up the recurring meeting as a mentor, that means that they have to come to me. There's accountability there, and also my calendar's a lot harder to punch a hole in than theirs, so they feel a bit less intimidated, I think, and I'm more likely to have to move it if I need to reschedule. So an hour every 4 weeks. I've got a basic tracker that I've set up in Excel, which enables me to just keep an eye on when reports are due, so I know whether we're behind or whether we're on track. And also, I also just make note of how I've been scoring the various different competencies over the different quarters or over the different years, so I can easily at a glance see a picture of where we're at. And because I know I've got that enables me to be a bit more fluid. The reports also are done outside the meetings, so they'll submit it to me by email. We'll work outside of the system, normally just in a Word document, and I'll fire that back outside of the meeting with my feedback on it. And then I might use, if a report's been submitted recently, I might use a portion of our meeting to specifically go through the feedback and where I thought there were strengths and weaknesses and how they can improve. And then obviously, if they're behind and they're not catching up, then I'll make time for a reality check. I'll grasp the nettle rather than just allowing it to keep going. But with that organizational base, then the meeting structure is fluid, and I'll always start with how are you. Now, I want to know what's going on in their work life. I want to know what's going on in their personal lives. It is a professional relationship, so you don't have to do that. It's not supervisory, but you know, I'd want a mentor to cut me some slack if I was going through a major life experience. And I was quite distracted, or I'd want, I'd want some slack if I was working against an extreme deadline and my boss was railing on me to get work done. So just actually coming from a point of understanding what baggage they're bringing to the meeting, I think is really useful. And for me, that the person, the relationship with that person comes first. Fundamentally, mentoring is about relationship. Yes, there's an end goal, but you can't get to that end goal without an effective relationship. I remember one meeting where someone actually disclosed potential harassment to me, and they were really emotional. They were really upset. It wouldn't have done either of us any good for me to have gone, oh yeah, okay, well that's fine, but have you demonstrated any competency this quarter?
No, of course not.
You can't. So again, the role of the mentor isn't necessarily to cover those bases, but because you put yourself in a position where you are for them and you want to help them, then actually you might find that they trust you and they disclose things to you, and they actually reach out to you for things that aren't strictly professional engineering, that are much more personal and career based for them. So the person comes first in every meeting, just so I understand where they're coming from. I ask about their latest projects. I ask them to explain things to me that I don't understand, because often they'll be working in a completely different field to me. And then sometimes I'll get them to explain things that I do fully understand, just so I can really assess their knowledge. But whatever they're working on, I'll seize on opportunities to maybe probe them about, well, what's really their level of autonomy? Why are you bothering with that? Well, okay, you've done this piece of analysis. What would happen if you were wrong, if you didn't do it right? What are the consequences? So, how did you conclude that? What support did you have? I'm always trying to gauge how much of this was their own work, how much support they had, whether they truly understand the engineering fundamentals behind it, for competence A and B. But then for competence C and E, I'm trying to understand, actually, do you understand the bigger picture and potential ethical, aspects of this? And pretty quickly, after a few quarters, you'll build up quite a good understanding of which competencies they naturally excel at and which ones they struggle at. And then I'll channel more of my questioning, more of my probing towards those areas. And what I find is, because I'm just constantly talking to them about once a month about what they're doing, when they do submit a quarterly report to me, I'm coming from a position of strength. I'm coming from a position of actually, I already understand how autonomous they are and what they've been doing. So I can call them if they're trumping up their experiences. I know it. I can see it straight away.
There's no surprises.
That's my structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know that that's what I'd say is the perfect template, but that's how I do it.
Oh, I think you've shared some really good sound advice there. Yeah, thank you very much. I think you've also highlighted as well all the skills that you need to develop as a mentor. It's not just about assessing the work that they're doing. It's very much looking at the bigger picture over the longer term, isn't it? Another great question is, if I am a mentor outside of the mentees organization, how can I help to ensure that my mentee gets opportunities to develop all of the UK spec competence requirements? Pam, if you'd maybe like to take that one.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. So my experience has been that over the past few years, I've kind of moved around a bit, and so I've kept the same mentees, and so therefore I've ended up in organisations that are different to the mentee. I think I've been relatively lucky in that I've been familiar with the organisation that they are in, so it's not been totally, you know, I've kind of known some of the people and known the organisational structure and perhaps been familiar with their role within the organisation, which I think does make it a little bit easier. But I think it probably just feeds back to the previous question around encouraging them to A, look for opportunities out with their organisation, and B, encouraging them, as you said, Sandra, to approach their line manager to help to see if the line manager can help look for development opportunities. The line manager will be, you know, acutely aware of their skills and strengths, maybe not from the perspective of UK spec, but certainly from the perspective of them being able to deliver on their role. So I think it's important that they have, you know, they use the kind of one-to-ones with their line manager, they use kind of annual reviews with them as an opportunity to take in some of the route towards professional registration. I think encouraging them to develop relationships with others in their organisations as well, maybe people in other teams, more senior members of the organisation that can support and maybe pass opportunities their way if there's things that come up and they know they're kind of open to new experiences. So I think just encouraging them to build up those relationships, you know, and having maybe not official kind of formal mentors within their organisation, but people who are kind of looking out for their development and certainly kind of champions within the organisation.
Yeah, that's allyship is something that seems to be frequently mentioned, isn't it? It's not just about having allies and trying to build up those allies over the lifetime of your career. Great, thanks for that, Pam. Good answer. The next question is quite a tricky one, I would say. It's one with a number of elements in it, and I'm particularly I'm personally very keen to hear your answers. As you all know, human relationships are hard to measure. Business metrics can take a long time to track, and the impact can get lost along the way. How does your organisation measure the return on investment in mentoring? And what do you get out of mentoring? And how is it translated to benefiting your career? I'm going to put that to you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. I'm glad you sent us these before I had to think about this one. You're right, return on investment is a difficult one. Partly because when I've moved and it's trying to monitor it, companies move on, so trying to monitor this over time and what the investment benefits are. But with both the companies I've worked with over the last 15 years, it's one of the things I've managed to do is get those companies to pay the fees of their mentors. So they don't just pay the fees of any engineer willy-nilly, or registered engineer willy-nilly. It's anybody who's a mentor. So there is some, they know then, so they've got a return of investment from their paying the £250, £300 a year on key fee, depending on whether you're a regular member or a fellow. Because they know that if somebody is mentored, and this isn't just mentoring in terms of professional stuff, the general mentoring, if somebody's mentored, they should develop faster and to be a better employee generally, whether it's in engineering, finance, HR, or where it is. If you've got a mentor, you should develop faster and to become a better employee in what you do. So they can put a measure on that investment in terms of what we pay this mentor. They have even if it's a review every 3 months, they're getting developed against the specification, so there is a bit of return on that. So that's about as close as I've got to be able to measure it.
Okay.
Anywhere I've been. I think over time data will become available, but the problem is people also move companies as well. So just when you get to the point where they've done 4 years, they've become a chartered engineer, you might get another year or two out of them. Some people stay for a long time, but others, a year after they've got their all right, and what's next? Where can I go? I'm a chartered engineer now. I'll go and work for somebody else and go from us at Gaydon to Aston Martin at Gaydon, and you lose track of where they are. So it's really difficult to track that overall. But it's that speed of development. That's where we see the benefit, and where I've seen it and managed to persuade the chairman at JCB that actually it's worth investing in, and our head finance chap, with all the difficulty we've gone through at JLR, to actually know we'll continue to pay mentor fees. They stop paying so many things. So, what do I get out of mentoring to move on? Keeps me up to date. I echo what John was saying. You learn things from your mentees. One of my mentees at the moment is he's doing software and networking. He's a digital technology solutions apprentice. So I'm mentoring him towards incorporated engineer. And what I know about software and networking, you can write a postage stamp with a 1-inch paintbrush. But I'm learning, and so every meeting I learn something about what he's doing, and the generic engineering stuff I know a lot about. I've been a mechanical engineer for a long time. It's that learning about all the new technology. So what do I get? A whole load of CPD.
Okay, good.
Every meeting is CPD.
Good.
I learned something about them, or that's what I get a lot from, and the proud dad moment.
Yes, of course,
moments of undergrads getting EngTech, people getting chartered and incorporated engineer, and that's the bit that gets you at the end of every relationship, whether they're successful or not. Was right. What did you get out of it? How can we get you to be successful if you don't make it through? Because you get the end.
Great, thanks very much. John, do you have anything to add in terms of return on investment? Have you any metrics you can share?
I do. I mean, we run. Well, the first thing I'd say is it is human. It's human factors we're dealing with here. They're hard to quantify. And if I'm looking to make an investment and I'm unsure of the return, then I need to look at the scale of the investment. And if I think of this in a one-to-one sense, what's the scale of my investment in one individual to mentor them? And I've said I do 12 or 13 meetings a year. There's probably a couple of hours a quarter going through reports. That's about 1% of my time, right? It's really small in terms of what I have to invest in order to speculate to get a return. Got a bit of echo from someone there. And to measure the return, we do run. I put out net promoter score surveys with everyone on my scheme as well. And I ask them to rate the scheme, but I also ask them to rate their mentor, and then say, well, how can my mentor improve? And what we see time and time again is people hugely value the mentor's contribution, and they couldn't be more complimentary about their mentors. So I think it's an enabler in employee engagement. I think it's an enabler in retention of really good graduate talent. So I'm perfectly willing to speculate 1% of my time to try and get that outcome.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to do a little bit of research to see if there's any stats out there, because I think there's probably some information there relating to recruitment and replacement costs when you lose staff. Perhaps that's maybe where you can put some financial metrics on it. But thank you, that's really, really good, interesting answers. And this next one I think is really probably for Mick. Evidence indicates that getting an IMechE or CMechE application form written up can take a lot of time and effort. I know certainly our team can testify to that. What's the most important piece of advice that you would share with an applicant who is going through the process of writing up their application form at present?
I would suggest is that they know the subject area, the subject matter that they're wishing to discuss. That's the priority. And what I would suggest to them is to write as many words as they can. Just keep writing and writing and writing about that subject area, and then cut it down to fit into the 400 words that's typically requested. It's about demonstrating what they know, not what other people know. It's about the word I. Virtually every sentence should start with I. I did. I carried out. And don't use the woolly words, the padding, the judged, I reviewed, I checked. Get into that detail. What does that review mean? What does that checking mean? Get into what I would call good old-fashioned mechanical engineering for A and B. So write as succinctly as possible, because the people that are receiving it, that's how they work. You know, we didn't take these waffly degrees. Excuse me if you did take a waffly degree, like English literature or economics and history. We are +4 or -4, and that's the detail we expect to see in a professional written engineering report. So succinct, to the point, no waffle or padding.
Okay, that sounds good advice. I think I'd add to that by saying, please read the guidance notes.
Exactly.
That's the other thing, the guidance notes.
The other thing, Sandra, is use Word, because that's fabulous for copying, pasting, deleting, and just making it jump off the page at the assessors. That's what it's about. This is me, have some of this.
Yeah. I'd say something I could add to that very briefly is I write it so that the assessors don't need to use Google or another search engine. That's the other tip I've found myself sharing with people a lot during the past year in particular.
Knowing industry jargon or acronyms, they're the bane of professional engineers' lives.
This one is another one, I think, relating to allyship in some ways. And I think it's another one that we'll all be keen to hear the response from, particularly with working from home from the past year. In my organisation, the head office is in Bristol and I'm based at a small satellite office. How can I connect to key influencers in the business who do not work the same office? Maybe you could share your thoughts on that, John, please.
I will. I'm really self-conscious about how much I'm waffling now and padding out my answers. But I'm not sure of the context of this one. Like you're mentoring someone who's in the head office and you're feeling a bit out of the loop, or whether actually you and your mentee are in the satellite office. It doesn't matter. I guess the answer is probably the same. So in this, I haven't worked in this position myself, so I might not be a huge help, but honestly, you are reliant on your network. You're reliant on developing a network and maintaining it in this situation. There's no easy way of doing it other than that. And networks are like everything in life. They have entropy, right? So they require an energy input in order to maintain usefulness out of them. So if you're not prioritizing time to catch up with contacts over a virtual coffee or an actual coffee when we all get back into the offices, then you know you're going to struggle to maintain those relationships. They're going to age. They're going to fall away. So I would say prioritize time to catch up with people you do know. Instant messaging is your friend. You know, just a quick message to someone who you worked with a year ago, just to say hi, just keeps things alive, and it doesn't cost you anything. Use LinkedIn or Yammer or whatever media platforms your business is using to stay up to date with the things that are going on at head office, things that are going on in those other parts of the organization, so that at least you're aware. And then I would say take every opportunity to travel, to visit to that head office when you can. And when you do that, don't be ashamed of prioritizing or scheduling in some time just to walk the office if you're allowed to, and actually just stop and chat to people you know, and just have those conversations, because that's what you're missing out on when you're in the satellite office. So schedule time to meet people, to bump into people, have those water cooler conversations. If you don't know people and you need to break in, then actually there's no shame in approaching people in the organization, finding out who those influencers are and just asking for 20 minutes, half an hour of their time to introduce yourself and understand what's important to them, and just start building a relationship. The other thing I'd say is that as a mentor, actually, if you're asking on behalf of your mentee, the other thing I'd point out is it's not your responsibility to have all the answers. It's not your responsibility to be able to link them in. Yes, it's great when mentors can do that. But if you're developing engineers struggling for exposure, you really want to be coaching them to be reaching out, coaching them to be building their own network, not relying on yours.
That's some really good tips there. I think really you're saying diarise time for networking and work at networking. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
using all the tools that are available to us nowadays in the current climate. Yeah, very much so. Good. That's a really good answer. Thank you. I think there's another one from Mick. When is IMechE going to return to conducting professional review interviews face to face instead of on Teams?
Well, that's another one. I'm going to put my Boris hat on now. It's down to Boris Johnson and the influences from government, obviously. But I can actually discuss this from a perspective of the new UK Spec 4. The new UK Spec 4, which kicks in later this year and definitely by the 1st of January 2022, has now got on the application form the IMechE prefer virtual PRIs. Okay? So virtual PRIs will always now take precedence. Obviously, there's a phenomenal cost associated with that. But I have been assured we may see 1 or 2 per month towards the end of this year of face-to-face interviews. But the priority is virtual.
Okay.
So hopefully that answers the question. Well, back in this year.
Okay, good step. Thank you. I think another one that's particularly relevant in the current climate. What additional skills should universities try to equip graduates with to make them more attractive and valuable to your business from the outset? And maybe put that to Simon, please.
I didn't spot you tag me in this one before. So this is completely off the hoof. In terms of their technical knowledge, they come out with some great stuff. I think the bit that they miss is the professional skills part. So they do presentations, which is fair enough, but they're assessed against those. But it's some of a lot of universities, some are moving away from it now, but it's all about and it goes back to what Wick was saying, the number of words in an assignment or an essay or a project. It's not about what the answer is. So it's equipping them to be able to write succinctly. It's about being able to do a professional presentation, not put lots of cartoony pictures in there, but actually produce this is what we did, this is what the answer is, this is what it's going to cost, and this is what we're going to produce. In short, few words, diagram on there, bang, out. And that's what we miss in terms of when people come in and you see the graduates and they start going through schemes and they do their first presentation and it's 20 slides long, where 4 will do. They write their first technical report. It takes them a week to write it when actually they could do it in half an hour because it's 300 words. It should be, rather than 300 pages. And that's the bit that's missing. Now, in terms of some of the new degree apprenticeships, that's built in. They've built professional development into the degree apprenticeships, and they've built it into the postgraduate diploma. So I think that's one of the things that's missing. It's getting better, but it's still missing from there. It's that, not the engineering knowledge. There's loads of that. It's about how to apply it. Now, you can only really get a lot of that in engineering, but it's when you're actually doing the job. But it's about applying it and making it short and succinct. He says, try not to waffle.
Pam, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would probably add actually something we were just talking about before the session started is resilience, and is learning what happens when you fail and how to reflect on that, because I think it goes back to an answer to an earlier question around developing engineers coming into a business and thinking they're immediately a 3 or a 4, and then they have that sudden realization of, okay, no, hang on, I was maybe top of the class and now I realise I'm coming in, at the bottom of the rung, so to speak, and they've got a lot of work to do to become, expert in whatever it is they're working in the world of work. So I think for developing engineers to understand that it shouldn't be that much of a shock, and I think it is for a lot of people, and I count myself in that. You realise how little you know when you go into industry. So I think resilience and learning how to fail and how to learn from failure is really important.
Great, thanks. John, did you want to add to that?
I don't think I have much to. I think that you're absolutely right, but I wouldn't want to sacrifice too much technical content. I think that's partly what businesses, what we need to do to bring graduates on. So I think if they lay the foundation for some of those things, and also ethics as well. I want engineers to come out of university understanding the technical aspects, but also feeling accountable for their ethical decisions that they make, and realizing that just trying to avoid responsibility for ethics is an ethical decision in itself.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't believe the time is 1:15 already. There's still loads of questions here, so I'm going to whiz up a wee bit. One here from Mick is, what's the biggest mistake? Sorry, the single biggest mistakes that applicants make at the professional review interview?
I've already covered this to some extent, and it's not answering the question that is posed.
Okay, so listening, yeah.
Exactly. The questions aren't difficult. Tell me about this project. But then they seem to go into automatic mode, and then they give them what they think the panel wants rather than listening very specifically to the question. Because the panel have read their application form. They are just teasing from them the detail. So make sure you know your subject upside down and inside out, but answer the question without, and as Simon's already alluded to it, waffling and so that the panel can come back in with additional questions to make it more of a natural conversation. Answer the question.
Great, thank you. Okay, before we move on to the questions that have been coming into the chat, it would be great if we get some tips from the four of you. So what would be your top three takeaway tips for mentors? And I'll put that to Simon.
Learn from your mentees. So you use, and probably wrong word, use and abuse them for your own CPD. You will learn so much from your mentees. Listen to them. John mentioned this before. Listen to them, and they may tell you things that you might not want to hear, but with experience, you'll know how to deal with them. And encourage them. And again, I think somebody else mentioned, I think Pam mentioned it as well. Maintain a log of activity. Keep a diary. I wish I'd done it.
Yeah, I think you've
really
touched,
hard.
you've led in very nicely there to one of the questions that came up that we didn't get to tackle about reverse mentoring. So you seem to be doing reverse mentoring already from the points you've listed out, which is great, super. Top three takeaway tips for developing engineers, and put that to Pam.
I think, track evidence as you go. As someone who didn't go through a scheme and who didn't track evidence as they went, I can speak from the painful experience of having to trawl through 3 or 4 years of what was in your brain and having to write it down. I would say read a recently chartered engineer's application as early as possible, so you know what you're trying to get to and you understand what the kind of finished article looks like. And don't assume that anyone is familiar with your subject matter. So, explain it in a way that you would explain something to someone in your family who's completely unfamiliar with what you do.
Really good tips, Anne. Thank you. Top three takeaway tips for scheme administrators, John.
Yeah, if you're a scheme administrator, the number one tip for me is get to know your business development manager. They're really useful. They're on your side, and they provide network opportunities with other scheme members as well. So that's my number one. I would say use simple, anonymous feedback surveys to reveal where your scheme can improve. That's where I've had the most value, I think, in terms of tracking. We can put all the metrics in place in the world, but actually hearing from people anonymously what they really think, that's the most useful source of feedback for me. And then I've learned this the hard way. Don't rely on the IMechE metrics or HRs for that matter. If you want to know who's active on the scheme, if you want to know whose applications forms you've signed, which mentors have been trained in the last three years, you've just got to have that information, track that yourself, keep your own records.
Great, thank you. And finally, before we move on to the questions in the chat, top three takeaway tips for professional review interview applicants. Put that to Mick.
Relax, enjoy, and answer the question.
Great, super, very succinct there, Mick. Thank you very much. Excellent.
If you can do all those, it is not as onerous as people build up in their own heads. Yeah, that's the biggest danger. The nerves gets them, and that can cause two things. It can cause over talking, a lot of talking, or hardly communicating. So if they can relax, because more often than not, after the interview, they say, it wasn't as bad as I thought. My internal interview by two CNGs was far more difficult than what I've had today. So relax and enjoy if possible. Yeah, and be succinct.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Lara now, and Lara can share with you the questions that have come in the chat. So hopefully there won't be any really difficult ones in there. So over to Lara. Thank you, Lara.
Great. Hello. Yes, so please do put your questions in as they come and we can go through them. So I have got one question, but one thing that has been brought up in the chat is about the number of engineers there are in government. So we've had a bit of a banter about that. I know that is an issue passionate to many of our members. I've got one question coming in here, and it says, I'm looking to support my first mentee to apply for chartership this year, and I'm worried that their technical skills within our industry are not broad and varied enough. Although the volume and quality of experience is there, yet I've only so far spoken to the line manager once directly over time. How do I gauge if I only have my own experience to directly gauge against, so that they are ready to engage with assessors with confidence? Even if, as is normal, the panel are usually not in the same industry. So I think I will ask that to Pam.
That's a really difficult one.
It is.
Poor Pam.
Sorry, Pam.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I mean, probably trying to get, I would say, more access to the line managers. I've kind of tended to do at the time of annual reviews to make it a point of speaking to the line manager at least annually to feed into the report. But I would say, even better if it's more frequent than that. Also, I think asking the mentee to do kind of anonymous feedback surveys of their own performance, so the kind of 360 feedback in terms of getting someone who's maybe more junior than them in the organisation, someone that's at roughly the same level, and someone who's more senior but maybe not a line manager, and getting them to provide a bit of feedback on their performance or on a certain project. Or I think that I've found that works well in the past to get a kind of unbiased assessment of the developing engineer's performance from a variety of people that can kind of help to gauge where they're at across different competencies.
No, that's a good answer. And I was just thinking of you just because you had the question about mentoring somebody outside your organisation. So no, I think that's used for that 360 as well. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Lara, just look at what we've been talking about, UK spec, right? The mentor and the mentee can sit down and have a look at the UK spec and see what their address or what the shortfalls are. Get back to basics. If he actually feels this way, whether he's not sure, then he could reflect some of these concerns to other chartered engineers within the organisation, within his network, even the local IMechE panel. Yeah, the area local panel, and just say, look, I've got a chap here or a lady here who's looking to apply this year. Could we see where they're at? Yeah, and get that broad brush as well. But UK Spec 4 and the guidance notes on the application form are a good source of information to see if they are ready.
Good. Yeah, he's actually apologised, by the way, saying sorry if it was a harsh question.
That's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, but as we explored in the very first mentor forum, it's really hard to know what the levels are, and actually loads of mentors struggle with this. How do I know that my mentee is ready, right? And unfortunately, it is a judgment call. You've got your framework and you've got your peers that you can call on, but ultimately you've got to get comfortable with making an assessment and making a judgment. And we did some fun experiments using live polling, and you can see that actually you get a huge spread if you just read a quarterly report and take it cold. You get a huge spread. Some people will score things 4, some people will score the same, the same piece of text, they'll score it 1. So actually, yeah, mixed advice is good. Get another mentor to come and on side to work out whether you're actually being a bit harsh and they are ready, or actually whether, your concerns are well founded.
Great. Thank you. I've got another question just coming in here. So it says, have you any thoughts on MPDS versus mentoring to the point of direct application submission? Happy to ask the question direct. Oh, so sorry, Mark, I should have let you. Mark, do you just want to come off line and just elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, right. Sure. So basically, like we've at Doosan Babcock, we've noticed that there's a number of people that like to, they kind of know what the UK spec is and what it's about, but they're quite happy to manage their own competencies up to the point of direct application. So in comparison to an MPDS scheme doing quarterly reports, something that's maybe seen as a bit more structured, if you like, kind of finding that individuals from kind of graduate level on, they can be quite happy with mentorship to be able to log their own progress and then just do the direct application at the end. So there's quite a varied team here from different situations. So just wondering if there's any thoughts on that.
Simon, because I haven't picked on you.
It's fine. And I've got
I'll
dive off in 2 minutes anyway. So the biggest difference I've seen between people that if they're on MPDS and they stick with it, or if they maybe drop out or they're working on their own, the ones on MPDS tend to get to the point of application slightly quicker because they're being monitored. They've got our mentor. They know that they've got to do a report every quarter, although it just reduced for years 2 and between 3 and 4 now. I believe they've changed the system, but it just gets them there potentially quicker. But if you've got somebody that can monitor their own and they're doing a report, some of them don't, they'll do a little write-up monthly. If they're doing that and they've got that capability, they may do it just as quickly. It is about that mentor support and getting that feedback. Whether you're doing it on MPDS or we've got our own system we started using internally, which it's only spreadsheet based, but it means everybody's on the same flipping spreadsheet, not 6 different systems. It's about writing a log, a report, and developing against that, and having a framework to it. That's the important bit. So whether it's MPDS or just regular mentor meetings, that's what gets the benefit. MPDS just gives you a framework to work to and gives you direct support from your business development manager a little bit more easily, because that's effectively how they're paid. It's our MPDS fees that pays for people like Farah.
Anybody else want to add anything? Because I see we've only got a couple more minutes left.
Well, just to that point, I think where MPDS doesn't work is when the focus is on the paperwork, because that's not where the value is, right? And that's what puts a lot of people off. They feel like, well, hang on a second, I've got 4 years of all of this admin burden, and at the end I've got to submit exactly the same application form as I would if I hadn't done any of it. So why would I bother? And I have to sell that to all of the undergrads and the grads that come into the business. And so I had to be able to sell it to myself first. So I had exactly the same question mark. But I've come to this realization that the value in MPDS is not in the paperwork. It's in the process. It's in the self-reflection process that the paperwork forces you to do. So if you take the paperwork away, as long as you're still doing self-reflection and you have that relationship, the mentoring relationship, that you'll get the same output. But it's just hard to stick to. You obviously need UK spec as the target and the sort of competence framework that you're working with, and you can get there. But how do you review yourself? Having a quarterly or half yearly reporting structure just kind of forces you to do it. So that's why it works.
I think we're almost running out of time, aren't we, Sandra? So
yeah, we try to keep to an hour. So yeah, I think we've probably got time for one more question, a very quick one.
Oh, right. Okay. So, Russell, the next one I've got on the list is in terms of sitting a PRI being done, is there a process still available so mentors can help do practice PRIs with Ds beforehand to help? Maybe Mick.
Yes, there are opportunities. They just inform membership at IMechE.org and ask if they can sit in on a PRI session. It's not a problem. They can do a morning session, afternoon, or indeed all day. And that will give them a feel for what the expectations are of the developing engineers. So, yeah, it's available. They should use it. They just cannot attend their own developing engineers like they used to be able to. That's changed. So, yeah, opportunities.
The other thing that's worth considering is doing mock interviews within your own company. So if you've got a developing engineer and you're not sure how they're going to perform at interview and you're their mentor and you know them quite well, get a colleague maybe to do a mock interview for them, because they will view them with a fresh pair of eyes and can perhaps be able to give different advice and guidance than you can. So I can see it's just getting to 1:30 now. So I think we need to bring the session to a close. I know Simon has had to leave already. So thank you all very, very much for joining the session today. In particular, thanks to our fabulous four, the experts who gave up their time to join us. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to all the attendees as well. The next session, we won't be having a mentor forum in July, but we hope to be back in August. And we'll also be looking at UK Spec 4 later in the year. But if you do have any other ideas for topics, please don't hesitate to get in touch so that we can add them to the agenda. So thank you all very much for joining in today. Very much appreciate your help and support, and thank you.